They say every neighborhood has that guy. You know, the one who treats the HOA handbook like it's the Ten Commandments, except instead of coming down from the mountain with wisdom, he comes strutting down your driveway in a reflective vest he bought off Amazon, clipboard under his arm like a sheriff's badge cell phone ready to snap any hint of a non-conforming tomato plant. In our neighborhood, that guy wasn't just annoying. He was dangerous, at least in the way only a little authority and a lot of ego can be. Let's call him Rick Halverson. Now, Rick wasn't elected. He wasn't appointed. Nobody handed him the keys to the castle. He just woke up one morning and decided he was the law. Started walking the street at sunrise, poking into backyards, taking photos of grass blades, peering over fences, always on the hunt for someone to catch someone, to correct someone to shame. Most folks would just roll their eyes. But last week, Rick crossed a line you can't walk back from, especially not with my grandfather. Before I get into the thick of it, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from, because by the end of this, you're probably going to be shaking your head, wondering how this could even happen in a quiet American suburb. So this whole mess kicked off at the kind of hour where only raccoons and bad ideas are awake, 5:30 a.m. I was barely vertical, standing in the kitchen with a box of cereal in one hand, fighting gravity. Then I heard it, the slow, aching squeak of the back fence, that wooden groan you only get when someone's hauling themselves over with too much weight and not enough grace. I stepped out onto the porch, and there was my grandfather, rocking gently, wrapped in his old army jacket, hands curled around a steaming mug of coffee. Without even looking up, he muttered, "There he goes again." I didn't need to ask who. Rick was halfway over our fence boots, grinding the boards, phone out, snapping pictures like he'd just stumbled onto a crime scene, zooming in on Granddad's tomato plants. Red-green, lined up in tidy rows, healthy as anything. Now, according to Rick, those tomatoes were some kind of threat to community standards. Let that sink in. A 75-year-old veteran growing vegetables in his own backyard was now an enemy of the HOA. I could feel heat boiling up inside me, that low, raw kind of anger that starts in your chest and tightens your fist before your brain catches up. I started toward the door, ready to give Rick a piece of my mind, every piece actually, but my grandfather held up one finger, slow and calm. "No," he said, patience. Then so soft I almost missed it. "Let a fool show himself long enough and he'll write his own ending." That's how Grandpa always was, steady, deliberate. The exact opposite of Rick's jumpy power-tripping routine. And it wasn't the first time Rick had been nosing around. He'd been inspecting our place for weeks, caught him poking by the shed, rattling the door like he was about to uncover a meth lab instead of a couple bags of potting soil and some old gardening tools. Every time we called him out, he'd flash this tight, oily smile and chirp, "Just doing my job for the HOA." Except newsflash, he didn't have a job. Grandpa filed complaints, documented every incident, kept a folder thick with dates, times, photos, even a log of Rick's favorite insults. But every time the HOA president, Marilyn Brooks, would smooth it over, pearls tight around her neck, smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Oh, Rick's just passionate," she'd say. "He really cares." Passionate, obsessed, whatever word you want. The HOA always had an excuse, said Rick was an informal compliance helper, whatever that's supposed to mean. Sheriff's office didn't help either. They shrugged and said unless we caught him red-handed and pressed charges, it was our word against his. That's when Grandpa stopped talking and started working. 3 days straight, he was in the garage, radio humming with old country, the door cracked just enough for the scent of motor oil and old leather to slip out. He'd call me in now and then, hand me a wrench, ask me to hold a wire, look something up on my phone. By the fourth morning, our wrought iron gate looked the same, but something had changed. Subtle wiring, low voltage, perfectly legal, clearly marked with a big yellow sign, warning electrified gate, no trespassing. Grandpa never cut corners, not in his life. Right on schedule before sunrise, Rick came slinking around again. Grandpa on the porch, same mug of coffee, slow and steady. Me crouched behind the living room curtain, heart pounding. Rick scaled the fence, muttering under his breath. Phone already recording reached for the gate, and snap. The jolt hit him. He let out a yelp. High panicked, stumbled backward, landed flat in the dirt, scrambled up, limping away, dignity leaking out of his boots. Grandpa didn't say a word, didn't even smirk. He just rocked a little, murmured, "That's the sound of justice." By noon, the whole block had heard the story. Rick, HOA's self-appointed sheriff, now the neighborhood punchline. But Rick, of course, told anyone who'd listen that Grandpa was setting illegal traps, putting the whole street at risk. Thing is, everybody already knew Rick. They'd seen him measuring grass, scolding kids about their bikes, peeking through windows at night. Nobody thought he was protecting us. They just hoped he'd go away. But that's not how obsession works. When a guy like Rick gets challenged, he doesn't slink off. He escalates. And that's what scared me, because Grandpa's calm didn't mean Rick was going to quit. Quick pause, because this is where most folks get it wrong. HOA rules aren't magic. They're boring on purpose, written, narrow, subject to the law. Nobody, clipboard or not, gets to override private property rights. The minute Rick hopped our fence, he stopped being a helper and started being a trespasser. The real enforcers. Written notice, due process, not a neighbor climbing your fence at dawn. It's not just about tomatoes, it's about boundaries legally and otherwise. But for people like Rick, HOA rules are just a costume, a way to feel big, to feel needed, to chase control when life isn't giving it to them anywhere else. When the community ignores small oversteps, the behavior grows. That's the trap. If you push back with drama, you're feeding the fire. If you document and follow every rule, you starve it. That's what Grandpa did. That's why it worked. But Rick didn't learn. Not even close. After the shock, a normal person would have stayed inside, licked his wounds, maybe read a book on boundaries. Rick did the opposite. Drove slow laps around the block in his beat-up pickup windows down, phone out, narrating to himself like he was filming a true crime docuseries about the Great Tomato Scandal. Sometimes he'd park across the street, arms folded, eyes boring holes through our front door. Other times he'd just drive by, phone up, recording. Grandpa unbothered. Kept to his chair, thermos by his side, calm like a man with nothing to prove. I couldn't sleep that week, too much tension in the air, the kind you feel in your gut. Then just after midnight, I heard it, the metallic scrape of bolt cutters on steel. I crept to the window. There was Rick, hoodie up, flashlight in one hand, bolt cutters in the other, muttering like a villain in a cartoon. My stomach dropped. He wasn't playing HOA anymore. He was breaking in. Before I could even call out to Grandpa, I saw the faint glow of a phone screen on the porch, and then Grandpa's voice, calm and clear. "Watch this, kid." He held a little remote thumb, poised like he was flipping the channel. Rick clamped the cutters onto the gate, click, then zap. Rick jerked back, dropped the cutters, slipped in the mud, howling, scrambling to his feet in a panic. Grandpa didn't move, just took a sip of coffee. "Trespassing again," he said, and then he lifted his phone, recording the whole thing. Rick, meanwhile, scrambled for his phone, dialing 911, voice shaking. "This man's trying to kill me. He's got an illegal electric fence." 5 minutes later, squad cars rolled in, red and blue lights washing over the yard. 2 officers' hands near their belts, eyes scanning everything. "Is there an active electrical device on that gate, sir?" one asked, all business. "Yes," Grandpa said, steady as stone. Low voltage permitted, clearly marked and recorded. He slid a laminated document across the porch table, permit specs, played the video, Rick hopping the fence bolt cutters, the shock, the whole 9 yards. The officers watched. One looked up, eyebrows high. "So you trespassed?" Rick sputtered. "No, I was conducting an inspection for the HOA at 12:30 in the morning with bolt cutters." The second officer's voice was pure disbelief. Rick's excuses didn't matter. Under state law, it was open and shut. Criminal trespass, vandalism, attempted theft. False police report. They cuffed him right there. Rick's bluster collapsed into desperate rambling. "You can't do this. He's dangerous. The HOA will hear about this." Nobody cared. Neighbors lined the street, pajamas and hoodies, watching from porches and windows. And then someone started clapping, quiet at first, then louder until the whole street was applauding. Not a riot, not a spectacle, just a collective sigh of relief. Justice finally served. Grandpa nodded at me, barely a smile. Sometimes justice just needs a little electricity. As the cruiser drove off, Rick's power, the fake authority he'd wrapped himself in, vanished. The gate he tried to break became the line he couldn't cross. I stood there and realized this wasn't about a garden or a rule book. It was about what happens when someone mistakes patience for weakness, tolerance for permission. Letting small abuses slide until the abuser forgets the rules apply to them too. But the next morning was the real ending. The street was quiet, in a way that felt peaceful, not tense. People waved a little longer, stopped to chat a little more, and nobody watched their backs. It felt like a storm had passed, like everyone could finally breathe. And here's the truth, the part that sticks with me. Authority doesn't come from a vest or a clipboard or how loudly someone quotes rules. It comes from legitimacy, real accountability, real consent. Rick never had any of that. He just wore a mask the rest of us were too tired to challenge until someone finally did. See, HOAs are supposed to keep things tidy fair. Not deputize neighbors, not override state law. When someone becomes an enforcer with no oversight, that's not safety. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. It always starts small, a photo, here a warning there, a smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes. When nobody pushes back, they don't see kindness, they see a green light. Silence becomes permission. Grandpa knew better. He didn't fight fire with fire, he fought it with facts. Dates, photos, permits, patience. That's how you win, not with anger, but with evidence. He didn't want to hurt Rick, he wanted Rick to stop. The gate wasn't a trap. It was a boundary clear as day. Rick crossed it, physically, legally, morally, and that's why he got shocked. That's the uncomfortable truth. So if you're dealing with an HOA bully, right now, here's my advice. Straight up, no sugarcoating. Learn the rules better than the person abusing them. Document everything. Never meet obsession with emotion. It feeds on drama. Stay boring, stay lawful, and don't mistake keeping the peace for letting someone run roughshod over you. Because peace built on fear isn't peace at all. Rick thought he was the hero. In the end, all he did was show how fragile fake power really is. Now, I want to hear from you. Ever dealt with a neighborhood enforcer, an HOA bully, or someone who thought authority meant entitlement? Did you fight back? Ignore it? Or did it blow up like it did here? Drop your story below. Read what others went through. Let's remind each other we're not alone, and just maybe learn how to draw a line that doesn't need electricity to be respected.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video của mình.